and welcome to Trojan Vision One-on-One. I am your host, Stephanie East. Trojan Vision One-on-One is where we go in depth and learn more about the people who make Troy University special. And joining me today is Dr. Govind Menon, who is one of the most prominent people here at Troy. I'm going to list everything that you are involved with. He is the acting dean of College of Arts and Sciences, the director of the School of Science and Technology, and right now the director for the Center for Materials and Manufacturing. When do you have any free time?
I don't, and that's the secret.
There you go. Well, Dr. Menon, first of all, we know that you have been at Troy for a while, but tell us about your life prior to Troy and your academic background.
Right, so I grew up in India, and I was a good student, but not very hardworking. And I love music, and I used to listen to Eric Clapton all the time on my record player, and all I wanted was a Stratocaster. If you're not familiar, a Fender Stratocaster is an American-made guitar, electric guitar, world famous, of course, and that's what I wanted. And so I had that on my mind, and as I said before, I wasn't very driven, but my aunt, she was a physician here in Troy, and she said, you know, Govind, a place like the United States, and Troy in particular, could be a little more freeing for you. It's not so rigid like India. So you will get to experience more. You can study what you want. You can keep your music alive. And I thought to myself, wow, I get to go somewhere. They make Fender Stratocasters. So that's why I packed up and came to Troy in 1987.
And what was your major here?
I majored in mathematics.
Wow.
Yeah, very close to music.
There you go. I know
Yeah.
you're deep in the science world, but you don't always hear of a connection between science and the arts.
You know, I'd like to think there is a deep connection, but you're right. Sometimes the analogy is strained.
So from Troy, you went on to UAB. Tell us about that.
So I finished my degree in mathematics. I always wanted to study physics, but the mathematical aspects of physics. Some might call it theoretical physics. And so at UAB at that time, there was Professor John Young, who specialized in relativity, and that's what I wanted to study, and that's what I got to study at UAB.
Well, that is one of my questions, but since you brought it up, I'm going to go ahead and ask you, what, as someone with a zero science background, except for what I was required to take, what does that mean? What is the study of relativity?
So in broad terms, it is the study of space and time. You know, what constitutes space and time, and is it rigid, is it fixed, or is it malleable? The answer is it is malleable, and it turns out the answer to that riddle is it is gravitation. Gravitation sort of manifests as curvature in the fabric of space and time.
Wow. That is very interesting. I want to talk more about that in just a little bit, but tell us about when you were younger. I mean, were you always involved in science? Were you always, outside trying to figure out how things worked?
In between, I was a goofball. You know, when you're very young, why would you study all the time? You know, because you don't know enough about the world to study. You need some time to gather data, reflect on, things you see, things you observe, till eventually you formulate an idea. No, so it took me for a while. And when I say a while, I don't mean into my 20s, but late teens. Really almost very close to when I coincidentally landed in the United States.
Well, tell us a little bit about when you left UAB.
Yeah.
What did you do after that? Did you come to Troy immediately?
I did. So I came here as an ABD. I knew my professors here, and Dr. Bateman, who was a physicist here, reached out to me and he said, Govind, we have a position. And I said, Dr. Bateman, I haven't finished my PhD. So he said, are you close to being done? I said, yes, I'm close to being done. Do you need to do more experiments? I said, no, I don't do experiments. I sit and calculate. And so he said, well, you can sit and calculate in Troy. Do you want a job? And I said, well, yeah, I'd like a job. And so here I am.
Well, you mentioned your PhD, and I saw the title of your dissertation, and tell us a little bit about that, because I would love to know what it was specifically you studied for your dissertation.
So again, it falls right in the middle of relativity. It turns out gravitation can sometimes be repulsive. So when you think of planets going around the sun or an apple falling off a tree, you think of gravitation as being attractive. But there are circumstances where gravitation can actually repel. And so I studied one such feature of repulsive nature of gravitation.
Wow, that is so interesting. So speaking of relativity, the Center for Relativity and Cosmology here at Troy was just recently established.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about this center and its purpose.
Listen, it's my baby, but there's a reason for it. So here we are in Troy. I don't have the pressures I would have in a big institution. I'm free to think the way I want to, pursue exactly what I want to do. And over the years, I slowly tried to cultivate myself. And the more time I spent with it, the more I liked the subject. And at the same time, I'm thinking, how do I help the university as well? At the same, while in studying relativity, we always have difficulty retaining faculty or hiring a good faculty. And one of the reasons is we do a lot, but we don't really tell our story. We don't make what we do visible. And I was thinking, as I was formulating these ideas, as at that point as a director of the School of Science and Technology, how do you tell a story? It should be cost effective. It should be reasonable. So over time, I thought of creating a center where if and when we needed faculty to teach courses anyway, I would retain faculty who specializes in relativity. That way, it's no cost to the university, but now we have a center. We have a focus, we can tell a story, and slowly but surely our academic reputation will be known to the rest of the world.
And what is that focus for that center?
So exactly, relativity, all mathematical aspects of it. So again, there is a certain amount of purity that smaller institutions will afford. Bigger institutions require you to chase after grants, do what's catchy, what's popular, or use all the buzzwords. Here, I thought we can focus on really what we want to do and solve the big problems about understanding, in this case, about space and time. So I have about 3 new mathematical relativists, all smarter than me. I want to replace myself with people who are far more intelligent, and I think I have done that. And in years to come, listen, I think our story will be told, and Troy will be heard of by more and more institutions.
That's fantastic. And tell us a little bit about your students who come through that center, and that center in particular, but even the science and technology. What kind of jobs will they have in the future? What does this help train them for?
Right. So let me talk about another center we have, which is the Center for Materials and Manufacturing Sciences. It's very applied. So in the hard sciences, perhaps it has to be said that we don't have enough students in this country pursuing the hard sciences. Whenever we get students, whenever we get good students, they immediately find a job or graduate school with full funding and scholarship. This is where we are. The more we recruit, the more students we bring. We have plenty of research projects. Some of our research projects are funded, not just in Center for Materials and Manufacturing Sciences. I'm thinking of our Department of Biological and Environmental Sciences. There are very solid researchers, they're well funded, and there is a career at the end of it. Not just a job, a career where you get to do what you want to do, what you're trained to do, and also graduate school.
Well, and you brought up some of the projects you guys are working on, and I noticed for the Center for Relativity and Cosmology that there's one called Quantum Field Theory in Non-Smooth Spacetimes. What does that mean?
Well, now how do I explain that? So we think of space and time to always be smooth, in the sense of smooth. You don't see a rough edge to a space, to space or time. And this notion of smoothness is a well-defined notion in mathematics. But there are certain regions where that is not so true. And interesting quantum effects can happen there. And so let me explain quantum effects. So at the moment, the universe looks like it's made up of two things. It's made up of the smooth gravity and this very coarse quantum theory, which describes subatomic particles. Very exotic things happen in this realm. Particles and antiparticles are created. And when you have space-times, these particles and antiparticles can be bent in different ways,
wow,
where one falls into a black hole, the other can emerge. And there are portions of space-time where that smoothness is no longer true. So very interesting quantum effects can happen. And a good bit of mathematical help is required to understand what happens in those extreme regimes of the universe.
Well, you mentioned a few minutes ago that it's hard to find students who study the hard sciences anymore.
Correct.
What do you say to someone to make it less intimidating?
Listen, you guys don't know what you're missing. It is just fantastic stuff. There is a reason science works, right? And it works, and behind how we understand science works, there's elegance, there's beauty, there's symmetry, and there's deep satisfaction in tackling a problem and understanding a puzzle. We're not mechanical people. People often think of scientists as just being immersed in something where they don't enjoy the rest of life. That is not true. To do science, I would say that you must enjoy what you do, and so I would urge all of you to consider going into sciences. I wonder if it has to do with how we teach science, particularly in our K through 12 system. And as you probably know, it's also difficult to find science teachers at that level. So I think that's the problem we're sort of carrying on and carrying forward.
That's very interesting, a good point. So we've talked about some of the research that you're working on. Is there a particular discovery or topic that you have that you're really proud of, or that stood out to you over the years?
Well, yes, it's a small step for a big physicist, but a giant step for mankind. I do have a solution named after me and my colleague, Chuck Dermer, who worked with me at the Naval Research Lab in Washington, D.C. So there is a Menon-Dermer solution known only to a few, but it's still out there.
Well, you have to tell us about that, though.
Well, it describes a possible environment outside an astrophysical black hole. So there are charges flying about. These black holes are eating other stars, and there are charges in electromagnetic fields that whirl around, and they reach sort of a nice equilibrium state. And I suppose this solution would describe such a state.
Well, and again, I know this, I'm asking this from a layman's term.
Yeah.
How do you discover that? Like, how do you research it?
So there's no recipe. So my next paper could be tomorrow or 10 years from now. And I tell that to my junior faculty in the center as well. There's always a crank, there's always a problem you can work on wherein you get a result very quickly. And they come and go. They come and go every day by the dozen. But to take time and work on a difficult problem, and even the small steps we make, is a huge satisfaction, and the thrill of discovery is that much more.
Now, we've talked about you as a researcher, but as an educator, when you talk about that thrill of discovery, what is it like when you see your students go, oh my gosh, I just found something?
Oh, listen, that's what I live for. That makes all the difference. And I tell my students very often, they're young, they're 18 years old, 20 years old, and it's a beautiful sunny day outside, and I tell them, listen, for some reason you are in my class here today and not outside on a sunny day. So you have given up something to be here. Make sure to make full use of it, and they do. And when they do, it's certainly very exciting, and students have moved on. I'm happy to say that our students, one of our physics major from a few years ago has taken on a postdoc position at MIT, only by turning down another postdoc position at Princeton. But there are other students who've gone on to rejected Cambridge and went to Colorado for various reasons, and going to places like Berkeley and University of Florida and such. And so as a teacher, that means a good bit to me.
And at the Center for Relativity and Cosmology, you also bring in experts from throughout the field to talk to the students too. Tell us a little bit about that.
We do. We have seminars. As you mentioned, it's a brand new center. So in the recent past, where we just started this, we have done things mostly virtually, but we have on occasion brought outside speakers. But we want to do exactly that and more of that. Students should know that this is learning is a living thing in such a way that it is shared by a large group of people, and I would like for them to see other people who are engaged with it and other people who have come up with great ideas, and to be able for our students to be able to interact with them live. That is also an incredible experience.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the Center for Materials and Manufacturing that you brought up earlier. This is a state-of-the-art building for Troy and could change the course of where Troy is heading in the future. Tell us more about the project.
So again, sustainability is the key. As we have plundered the planet, we have gotten ourselves to a very difficult situation. There's plastics littering everywhere, even deep in the oceans. There is a certain amount of plastics in the human body. Mm-hmm. And so as we think of the utilitarian aspect of science and how science really responds to society and people, there is an obligation for scientists to help clean up this planet. We may have made this mess, so we have to clean it up. And so we're working on creating the next generation of plastics that would be recycled more easily. We're doing it in baby steps. It's fairly new. The center is new. The building is new. But once again, we hope for large, incredible, great results in the near future.
And this is the first building that is just for research on Troy's campus, right?
Yes, it is. There are no classrooms. Every room, but it's either an office space or a lab.
And what has the reaction been from students?
They are in awe, much like any one of us here. I mean, this is new for us. We had one of our scientists, he was a postdoc at Cornell, and his advisor had come down for the opening ceremony, and he remarked that, well, this is top shelf, even compared to what they have at Cornell.
That's fantastic. So switching gears completely, one very interesting thing about you is that you have a very big family connection here at Troy. Your wife is also a professor, the head of the Global Honors College here. And tell us a little bit about having your family be a part of the Troy family.
So, I think we are an academic family, and to me, that's the only way I could sort of deeply connect with people, so much so that that's the only kind of family I could have imagined. I'd like for my daughter to be an academic. Again, music is very important to me, so I make sure every day I check to see if she had practiced the piano, and she does most of the time. And so my wife is the same way. Most evenings when we get back home, we spend a little time together, and then I go to my study and she'll go to her study, and she's picking away and doing research in her own field, as do I. And of course, we don't get that much time after hours because, again, we have a daughter, and we spend time together. But academics is very important to us, and gosh, it couldn't be better when we work at the same place, because I live in Montgomery, so we get to commute together back and forth, so it's not a lonely drive.
Well, you talked about music too, and you mentioned at the very beginning your love of music.
Yeah.
Is that still a huge part of your life?
Oh yes. Occasionally I still take, these days I play classical guitar for the last 10-15 years. I don't play it very well, but I'm happy to play it anyway. So I try to practice, and I occasionally take guitar lessons from Dr. Robbie Gibson here in the School of Music.
And we mentioned that we always think that science and arts are completely different, but you say there's actually more of a connection than we think.
Oh, there's much more. One of the mathematical physicists I learned relativity from when he would throw parties at his house at UAB, we were not allowed any electronic entertainment. Very often he would play a Chopin piece on his grand piano before the party began. So I think there's a big connection between music and mathematics. I find that to be an overwhelming thing.
Looking ahead, so you've been at Troy for a while now and you've seen some big changes over the years. Let's start there. Tell me about some of the changes you've seen at Troy since your first few years here.
Oh gosh, Dr. Hawkins is certainly a visionary. This place did not look like this when I joined here in 1996 as a faculty member. It was great back then, but we have steadily made improvements. The buildings look better. Our faculty are stronger and better than ever before. And once again, we have the freedom, I think, to pursue what we want to do. We're able to think freely. There's no pressure, and that is an environment that has been cultivated, and that the change is only for the better. And
what do you see the future of Troy University, and in particular the Science and Technology and Arts and Sciences College?
Yeah, we try to recruit students, all universities do, but there is another aspect of recruiting that comes from soft power. And Dr. Kerry Palmer, the Senior Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs, he's been mentioning something that I've picked on. He talks about an academic renaissance. It is sort of a rebirth, but I think that is very appropriate. I think during his tenure, we can see more of that, a focus on academics, and that story will be told. We may not have to work so hard to recruit anymore. Imagine a kid one day just waking up in Tennessee, does not know anything about Alabama in particular, but he or she might go to their parent and say, listen, I want to study in Troy, Alabama. And they would go, gosh, where is Troy, Alabama, and why would you want to study at Troy, Alabama? Oh no, in particular, I want to work for the Center for Materials and Manufacturing Sciences. Don't you know about it? Here's some info on. So when we tell our story, that's going to happen. And we'll shine brighter, and that is very important to me.
I think that sounds like a great marketing campaign. Dr. Govind Menon, thank you so much for being with us today and telling us your story. We truly appreciate it. This was fascinating.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And that's it for Trojan Vision One-on-One. Join us next time.